Hey guys, Ron Lyons here, the Tactical Redneck. Today I've got a very unique and different kind of video for you. You can tell from the title, it's not your typical glamorous or what I call Hollywood video that deals with doing the really cool stuff like building out a kit and putting stuff in there like your fire starter, your water purification, your pew-pew, your IFAK and all that kind of stuff. So this is not that kind of video. This is way more practical and realistic. It's what I call a backfill of your kit. Now, you don't understand if you've never been in the situation where you actually have to rely on that kit. We all have this, imaginary situation in our mind where we're out, we've had to bug out, or we've found ourselves in some sort of a survival scenario, and it's a cold night and we have to start a fire, and thank God in our kit we've got a fire starter and we've got Tinder and we've got redundancy throughout our kit. So if this way doesn't work, then we've got a backup system that will. That is all awesome. But here's the reality of it, and I know this from experience. I've had to rely on my own personal kit a couple of times in the past. And here's the thing. If you're out there and the sun's beating down and you're having to do a lot of stuff outdoors and you're like, hey, this is awesome. I've got my knife, I've got my this, I've got my that, I've got all these things that I need. But what I could really go for right now would be some chapstick with sunscreen in it. That would make everything so much better right now. And I know that sounds a little bit silly, but when you're actually out there in the blazing sun, accomplishing whatever your mission is, and your lips are drying out and they're splitting open and they're bleeding, it takes your mind off of whatever you're supposed to be focusing on. It can sidetrack your mission. And usually in those situations, your mission is survival. So here's what we decided to do. We decided to go to CVS, which is just a drugstore, and find the top 10 things that you should probably backfill into your kit, into all of your items that you've already built, so that you can have that practicality, you can have that little bit of edge that you need in order to truly function out there in a bad situation. So I said we're going to do the top 10 things, but we ended up getting a little carried away, and we may have doubled that number. So we're going to go through all this stuff. I've got a table full of things that I shop for at CVS. And like I said, this is very practical stuff. Stick with me to the end on this. Make your own list. And of course, this is not meant to be complete. This is what I did on one walkthrough of CVS. You're going to have great ideas. I want to hear those. I hope that you'll comment below and tell me, hey, here's something that I think you ought to add. And let me just say this. A lot of guys who've been in the military, you get all of your military issued gear. You have all the things that Uncle Sam believes that you need. But always out in the field, in real life, the guys that do the job on a regular basis, they figure out the little tips, tricks, and hacks, the things that they need that actually makes life better, makes survival better. And yeah, sometimes it comes down to something just as simple as, like I said, a chapstick. So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna run through these, no particular order, but let's start off with the first thing. So all of this stuff is meant to be very economical and also very portable. There's a lot of things, like I could go out, here's one of the first examples. This is a little bit of sunscreen right here. I could obviously buy a big 9, 10, 12 ounce bottle of sunscreen, but that's gonna be bulky in my pack. What I need is something smaller like this. Is this gonna get me through several days of crazy sun? Nope. But is this gonna help me get past a situation that's very temporary in nature? Is this gonna be maybe a game changer? This is a massive game changer. Okay, so there's one example right there. Sunscreen, very small tube, stick in your pack, good to go. Okay, now when you're out and you're fighting all of the elements, one of the things that can annoy you like crazy and make you very sick, depending on what part of the world you're operating in, is mosquitoes. And so having a small can, this is little bitty, this isn't very big at all, a small can of insect repellent like this. This is a little can of off. Fantastic. This is a game changer for you. Now there's other sizes. You can get much bigger ones and you can get even smaller ones. This happens to be the size that they had. This is what I grabbed, but I would highly recommend that if you're making a list right now, put bug spray on the list. Put some insect repellent, especially something that's geared towards mosquitoes. And ironically, a while ago, whenever I said that about the chapstick, I wasn't actually kidding. This is one of the things that can be absolutely incredible for you to have. A chapstick. Now this one doesn't actually have the SPF. This doesn't have the sunscreen in it. If you do get the actual chapstick brand, the one you want to look for is the blue one. And it actually has sun protection factor in it. It's got an SPF rating that's going to help you dramatically. Like I said, when you're out in the sun, things are going crazy. This little guy right here will be your absolute best friend. All right, and we're going to move on. This is probably a lower list item, but nonetheless, still very important. And I know that there's larger, there's smaller, but this is a nail clipper. And what happens is you're typically out and you're working. I don't think you're going to have the vanity out there. You're not going to say, hey, my nails are looking kind of long in the survival situation I'm in right now, and I sure wish that I had a nail clipper. That's not what I'm talking about. But what you will do is you'll end up getting hangnails and stuff like that. And if you've worked in any sort of a situation intensively with your hands, you get a hangnail and you end up throwing out a few curse words when they get really bad. One of these, take it, clip the hangnail, back in business. If you do end up damaging a nail and it's pretty bad, you usually have one of two choices. You either just kind of survive with that nail that's kind of torn in a really, really bad way, or if you had a nail clipper, you could go ahead and control how the rest of that nail goes. You don't just peel it off and live with it. You take a nail clipper like this and you make that nail way more functional than if you were to just rip it off. Certainly ignoring it is not always the funnest thing to do either. All right, hand sanitizer kind of goes without saying. In a lot of these situations, we're going to be exposed to a lot of stuff that's not a whole lot of fun, and it's not exactly like you can just run into the local McDonald's restroom and wash your hands. So having a very small bottle of Purell, some sort of hand sanitizer like this, is going to be absolutely important and imperative to keep you from getting sick when you're out there. You don't want to touch a lot of stuff and then make your chow and eat, ended up getting sick from that. All right. Again, no particular order. I'm just running through these things and trying to get them to you pretty quick so you don't have to sit here forever and watch this. Toothbrush in a travel kit. This thing comes with a little tube of toothpaste. It's got a little toothbrush and a cover on it. Very, very inexpensive, fairly flat, easy in the kit. They've got all different kinds. I like this one. Obviously, we're at CVS and you have to, choose from what's available at CVS. This one's been fantastic. In the past for me, these things are very disposable. You can throw them away. And I could go out on a limb and I could tell you all kinds of funny stuff like, oh, you could sharpen this and use this as a weapon. That's not what this is about. And that's kind of getting out there just a little bit. If you find yourself in a situation where you've got to sharpen a toothbrush to fight off some sort of an attacker who's trying to steal your water or something, make good notes and write a book, okay? Because that's going to be something that's going to need to turn into a movie. You're probably not going to have to sharpen this into a weapon and use it, but you may want to actually brush your teeth. You're probably going to be, very concerned about that. And so having this in your kit, super simple, not a big deal. Okay, Lysol wipes. They have different types. This is just a disinfectant type wipe. This is not necessarily for you to use to clean your backside after go 10-200 out there, and it's certainly not as a hand cleaner, but there's going to be things you're going to have that need to be cleaned. Perhaps it's an eating utensil or a plate or a dish or something like that, a camp bowl, camp fork, whatever. you're going to want to clean that off. You may need to open something with your knife, but your knife's already seen some duty and some not so awesome stuff. You want to clean that blade off. Here you go. And so you can get the big giant, containers of these things, or you could get a big container and then put a few into like a Ziploc bag, or guess what? They sell them in these little travel size deals. Throw one of these in your kit. And if you ever need to disinfect something, very, very easy right there. All right, now here's something that, this is not something that I got from a Rambo movie. And I'm not gonna like take this out into that fringe area out there, but having a little sewing kit like this is a super, super good idea. Not so you can sit there like Rambo and sew up your arm. I'm not talking about that, but you're going to tear things up. You're going to rip things. You're going to have things that need repaired. You don't have to have an awful lot of skill to do just a really basic stitch. And so everything that you might possibly need, there's a small scissors, there's needles, there's thread, there's pretty much everything you might need in this tiny little kit. Now this comes out of this package and it's in a much smaller package right here. Very, very easy to stick in your kit. And then guess what? You've got a little sewing kit in the event that you rip something and you need to sew it up. If you're out there doing the deal where, you've got to be very gray man, okay? If you don't know what gray man is, look that up. And you end up shredding your shirt right across your chest. You're not very gray man whenever you've got a shirt ripped open and you're trying to, ambulate down an urban street somewhere. You're going to stand out. People are going to look and wonder how that happened. You're trying to be incognito. You're trying to go under the radar. You may need to get your kit, pull out your little sewing kit, stitch up that little tear and blend in. So you're going to want to have something like that. Now, something that I think is really, really important to have, and I say this from experience, is a small notebook. Because you'll get in situations where you need to either make notes, you need to remember things, or you need to draw out buildings or make little maps and do things like that. If you've got a very small notebook like this, then you can do those things. I've done the other version where you take a stick and you draw in the dirt and it just never works the same way. So having a small notebook like this can be really, truly a game changer. I can't tell you how often I've been in a situation where I thought, man, if I just had a little, we used to call them a whoop out book in law enforcement. It's just a little notebook that you keep in your pocket, and those things were super handy. Same concept. Okay. Now then, if you've got the little notebook, then guess what you need? You need something to write with. So a pen, a couple of pens, obviously for the writing, doing all that kind of stuff. I'm not stuck on the idea of pens. As a matter of fact, I'm kind of a big fan of pencils as well. Maybe even slightly bigger fan of pencils. The idea is that you need something to write with, something to make notes, something to draw maps, something to do plans and things like that when you're out in the field. If you have a pencil and if you have a blade, then you have a way to write, okay? So they have pencil sharpeners, small ones. You can throw this in your bag and you could utilize this to sharpen these pencils anytime. But you know what? Even if you've got a small knife, you're going to be able to sharpen a pencil and have a writing instrument. And we're not going to go all Rambo. I keep saying things like this because I think it's funny, because I watch all these videos and I'm not trying to throw shade at anybody. I kind of get a giggle out of them, but there are people out there who would say, hey, you could take that pencil sharpener and sharpen a stick and make like an arrow out of it, or you could set up a trap or something. We're not going there. This is a pencil sharpener. My idea with this is that you can keep this thing functional so that you can have a way to write, make plans, draw out schematics, or whatever you need to do. Draw a map, or just leave notes. You may be taking medications or something like that out in the field, and your memory is going to be really, really, really not exactly perfect. And it might be really, really nice to just be able to say, all right, I took this at XYZ time. And then you just look back. Was it 6 a.m. that I took that, or was it 10 a.m.? I don't really remember. You look in your little whoop out book. There it is. Okay. Now let's keep on moving. I was telling you that a while ago about these are not necessarily for cleaning the backside. But guess what? If you do want that, if you don't want to keep a roll of toilet paper, something like this is a really, really good idea. Now, I'm not personally a huge fan of these, but they do serve more purposes if you need them. They're not just for, you know, the obvious. You really can use these to clean your hands. You can use these to wipe things down. They're not sanitizing. They're just for cleaning, just for general cleaning. And hey, you know what? Out in the field, if you want the luxury and comfort of something like this, and you don't want the old school toilet paper, then by all means, a small pack of these, stick them in your pack, and you too can travel in luxury and survive better than your friends that are out there having to do it the old school way. All right, here we go with something that you're gonna think this is interesting. Cotton balls. Like, why in the world do we need cotton balls, Ron? Well, here's the thing. Cotton balls can obviously serve a lot of different purposes. The biggest thing that I would say that I would probably keep some cotton balls for is I would take a little bit of Vaseline. I'd take those cotton balls and I would put a very ample amount of Vaseline on those cotton balls, and I would probably stick those either in a plastic Ziploc bag or something like that, fold it down super tight and tuck that thing away. So then if I get into a situation where I need a little bit of Vaseline, I can actually use the cotton ball to do something like that, you know, utilize the Vaseline portion. Or here's me going a little bit out, stretching it out a little bit. If I need to start a fire, that serves as very, very good fire tinder if you've got Vaseline on cotton balls. So not a huge fan of having cotton balls, but this combined with a little bit of Vaseline does make a very inexpensive type of fire starter. And there's a lot of other reasons, a lot of other purposes that you can use these. If you were out in a situation, you didn't have anything to put in your ears and you've got a bit of an earache coming on, or it's super cold, anything like that, there's reasons why this would make a whole lot more sense. But for most people, having a pack of cotton balls in your bug out bag or whatever is not gonna be, you know, high priority. But I do think that there are situations and times when having that can serve certain purposes, and sometimes dual purposes. Like I said, the Vaseline, the cotton ball fire starter, having a way to apply Vaseline to something, there you go, okay? Let's move on to this. Now, this is something that I think is super practical, and it's kind of like having zip ties around the ranch. It's really useful, but I couldn't tell you all the ways right now that they're useful, just that you always need zip ties. Well, in your bug out bag, in your kit, having a good pack of rubber bands like this, oh my goodness, you have no idea how many different things that you can find to use these on. They are so super handy when you're out in a situation like that, and easy to put in your kit. These things can go around different things that are in your kit. If I was putting this together, I could put quite a few rubber bands just around the lid of my hand sanitizer right here. I could put 6 or 7, maybe 10 on the lid of this and put this in there. And then I've got a dual purpose thing. I've got my hand sanitizer. I've got 10 rubber bands on it. I'm good to go. I don't necessarily have to put this entire pack in there. Okay. So rubber bands, huge help whenever you need them out there. All right. Ziploc bags. You're not going to put this big box in your kit. I'm not saying that. What I'm doing is I'm showing you the box, and these, I believe these are like a sandwich size. You've got all different sizes for all different purposes, but the sandwich size seems to be the most useful when you have your kit, okay? Well, there's nothing stopping you from buying multiple different sizes and then utilizing what you need. You can, you know, throw that peanut butter and jelly sandwich in it through the week when you're making your lunch for work. And then you can use a couple of these to help build out your pack when you're sitting here thinking about survival and things like that. So putting those little Vaseline cotton balls in there, putting anything in there that needs to stay dry, waterproof, etc. A Ziploc bag like this, is going to be fantastic for that. If you're having to cross water and you've got a lot of documents, things like that in your pocket, even your entire billfold or wallet in there, push the air out, zip it down, fold it up in your pocket, and you can cross that water with no problem, no worry about damaging any of the contents of that. You've got certain things like a watch or jewelry, and you want to consolidate those into one place, not have them scattered and lost. Guess what? Ziploc bag right there. All right, let's move on just a little bit. This is a fairly obvious one, but it's one that's overlooked so often, and that is just plain and simple batteries. You need to know your kit, you need to know your gear, you need to know all of the things that you have, and be absolutely certain that anything that requires batteries, you have batteries. Okay, and there's 1,000 different things out there. You can do rechargeables, you can do solar chargeable batteries, solar panels, small portable panels that you can set up to recharge the batteries that are in your device. There's a lot of different ways, so I'm not trying to go down that rabbit hole. I'm just saying that somewhere in your kit, whatever kind of kit it is, if you have battery operated things, have batteries. It's just one of those things where you get out there and you're like, oh crap. You know what I don't have? What? Batteries. There goes the light. There goes the whatever. So get those. And then the last thing that I'm going to kind of put together and show you here, just as an example. Okay, now I could have spent a whole day and an awful lot of time on a video showing you this next section here, but I just want to break it down to some of the more obvious things, but they're very, very, very critical things. Now, when you build your kit, I hope that in your kit you have an IFAK, an individual first aid kit. That's the big boy. That's the one that's got like usually a chest seal. It's got a tourniquet. It's got real bandage, real gauze, stuff like that. Very much geared towards high-end trauma, gunshot wounds, things like that. But you know what you're gonna need more likely than a chest seal? You're just gonna need a regular Band-Aid. And so what I'm gonna suggest is that you get something like a little travel kit just like this one. Now this is kind of silly compared to like an IFAK. If I have an IFAK sitting here in this really looks like a little kid's toy, but it's not. Let's just call this a boo-boo kit, okay? That's what we used to call them. It's a boo-boo kit. You're out there, you're doing something with your blade, you're doing something else, and you end up getting a nick, a cut, or something like that, and guess what? All you need is a very simple bandage, just a simple Band-Aid. That's all you need. That's why you need your little boo-boo kit. You don't need the big, full, extensive Red Cross style, boo-boo kit. You need something small, something that fits in your kit very, very simply and easily. And let me just say this, if you're gonna have a kit, you need antibiotic cream, topical antibiotic cream. There's a lot of different kinds out there. This is the CVS brand, I believe. Yeah, this is the CVS brand, just a topical antibiotic cream. When you do get those cuts, when you do have those situations, I ran my foot right through a pitchfork, believe it or not, that was sitting with the blades up, and I ended up catching that like that. Things like that require that, you're up to date on your tetanus vaccines and deals like that. But what you can do in the immediacy, what you can do in that situation right then is clean the area, wash the area, and hit it with a good topical antibiotic. And so this is one of those things. You need it. You need it if you're gonna be out in the field, and I wouldn't have a kit without some topical antibiotic in it. Okay, when you're out there in the field, chances are real good that you may run into smaller enemies than what you would expect. And what I'm talking about is fire ants, wasps, hornets, bees, things like that. Having a small pack of Benadryl is a really, really, really good idea. So this is actual literal Benadryl, but they have the house brand, the CVS brand, and stuff like that. So this is good old Diphenhydramine. And, liquid, capsules, pills, whatever, your choice, your kit, you make it the way you want. But when you're somewhere and you get that bee sting and you're like, hey, I've never been allergic to this before, but now all of a sudden you've got that adrenaline level up, your histamine levels are already high, You're out, you're sweating. You may find out that you're a little more allergic to something like that than you thought, or someone else in your group, someone else that you're with, maybe someone in your family. So a small pack of Benadryl, perfect addition to your kit. All right, now it kind of goes without saying that you're probably going to end up having some aches and pains and possibly some pretty substantial injuries. So having some sort of a analgesic, some sort of a, an over-the-counter, an OTC painkiller, Advil, Tylenol, something like that. Non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, that's what these things are. Having your Advil, having your Tylenol. I personally prefer Advil. Obviously, if you've got stomach issues or, certain allergies, then you can't do Advil. But for me, Advil is my choice over Tylenol. It's just, to me, it's got a better anti-inflammatory effect, and I think it works a lot better. If you're out in the field and you catch a fever out there and you've got the chills and you need to function, but it's really, really hard when you've got a fever. I'm not talking about a low-grade fever. I'm talking about it spiking up to the point that it makes you feel bad. Guess what? Go into that kit, pull out the Advil. You're going to have to move your fire starter, your water purification, and all that stuff out of the way and get down in there. But guess what? When you have this, when you need this, this is a game changer. All right. Now I've got one last thing, and this is one of those tried and true deals right here. This is the kind of stuff that, you're out in the field, and what you want to do is maintain your focus on the mission. You've got to stay on point. You've got to be hitting on all 8 cylinders when you're in a situation like that. And all of these things, like you get a good little cut on your hand, or you're getting torn up with mosquitoes, or you've got that sunburn, your lips are chapped and they're cracked and bleeding. All of those things, those are exactly what we're talking about right now. Is you want to fix your kid up in such a way that you can avoid all of those, or at least mediate those things. One of the worst things that you can have when you're out in the field, maybe worse than a bee sting, worse than a cut, is whenever you go to having a toothache. When you start having a toothache and you don't have anything that you can utilize, some sort of a topical analgesic for that, then it can be very disheartening. It can lower your morale. It can take your focus off of your mission. It can do so many negative things. So hopefully you never need this. Hopefully you never need any sort of an oral analgesic like this. But if you do, if you get popped in the mouth and you've got a big sore in your mouth, anything like that happens, you're going to be so happy to have this tiny little tube of stuff to use in your mouth. So I would absolutely, that's one of the things that's overlooked all the time. Yeah, you've got the Tylenol or the Advil and you can take that for the pain. But if you want to get something on it real quick, or you need to hit it very, very directly in your mouth, here you go. Some sort of an oral topical analgesic made to be utilized in your mouth. All right, guys, I hope that you received a lot of value out of this today. Now, I realize that this video is not the most cutting edge, exciting kind of video where, we're talking about water purification and all of those things, lots of redundancy and, how to actually put those hardcore, primary items in your kit or your bug out bag or whatever. But here's the thing, just like always in life, the devil's in the details. And usually it's the small things that make the biggest difference. So if you do have to get out, if you do have to perform, execute, do things like rely on your kit in order to survive, protect your family, protect yourself, get into a better location, whatever it is, these little, what I call backfill items, can make all of the difference for you out there in the field. So make your own list. If you've got ideas, of course, like I said, throw them in the comments down below and let's talk about it. We are building a really awesome community here. You're part of that. You're exactly what motivates us to keep doing this. We've got a little website called tacticalredneck.com. If you pop over there, you're going to find some ball caps, t-shirts, backpacks, things like that. And if you should decide to buy something off of there, just realize that the little bit of profit that comes from those things comes right back here so that we can continue doing exactly this. Anyways, guys, until our next video, stay safe and God bless.